If you had met Daniel Adebayo 5 years ago, you would have thought him a king. Tall, broad-shouldered, and confident, he was the kind of man who filled a room with his presence alone. As a civil engineer, Daniel was respected in his community, admired in his workplace, and adored by his circle of friends. But that was before he married Linda. At first, Linda seemed like a blessing. Beautiful, poised, and fiercely intelligent, she had a way of making people feel special. She was the woman who knew exactly what to say at family dinners, the one who never forgot birthdays, and who turned heads everywhere they went. But behind closed doors, Linda was different. What started as playful teasing slowly morphed into subtle commands. Daniel, you should wear this. Daniel, don't say that in public. Daniel, you're eating too much. Daniel, fix your posture. You look weak. Daniel laughed it off in the early days. Marriage is about adjustments, right? But over time, the commands became relentless. Linda didn't ask, she directed. She didn't suggest, she instructed. And Daniel, wanting peace, always complied. It wasn't long before his friends started noticing. Bro, do you even choose your own clothes anymore? Man, you're not yourself. What's going on? Daniel smiled through it. She's just particular. I don't mind. But he did mind. He minded when Linda scrolled through his phone every night under the pretense of keeping things transparent. He minded when she decided which family events they would attend and which they would skip. He minded when she told him how to sit, how to speak, how to think. Linda had a remote control, invisible to everyone else, but painfully real to him. Every button she pressed dictated his actions. Volume up when she wanted him loud. Mute when she wanted silence. Channel switch when she was bored of his mood. Daniel was no longer living. He was being operated. And yet, somehow, he told himself it was normal. That's what husbands do. They adjust. Until one day, Linda pressed a button she never should have. And that's when everything changed. The weekend that changed everything began with something as simple as a grocery list. Daniel, get these items exactly as they are written, Linda said, handing him a neatly folded piece of paper. No substitutions. No improvising. Understood. Daniel nodded, suppressing a sigh. It wasn't unusual. Linda had a way of turning small errands into controlled missions. If he returned with the wrong brand of rice or an unfamiliar juice flavor, it would spark an evening of disapproval, subtle at first, then sharp. But this time, something was different. As Daniel stood in the supermarket aisle, holding a bag of the rice Linda requested, an elderly woman beside him chuckled. You look like a man solving a puzzle. Daniel smiled politely. My wife is particular. The woman nodded knowingly. Let me guess. She has you on remote control? He laughed awkwardly, but the words struck him. On his way home, Daniel replayed the woman's comment over and over. Remote control. That's exactly what it felt like. When he got home, Linda was on a video call, seated with perfect posture, issuing instructions to her junior colleagues. Her tone was sharp, precise. She thrived in control. As soon as Daniel entered, she ended the call mid-sentence. Where's the receipt? She asked, without looking at him. Daniel handed it over. She scanned it, inspecting every line. You took 10 minutes longer than necessary. Why? Daniel was stunned. The queue was long. She raised an eyebrow. You should have chosen a faster lane. Next time, plan better. There it was again. The click of a button. He could almost hear it in his head. Mute. Daniel bit his tongue. That evening, as they watched a documentary, Linda sat with the remote in hand. Daniel couldn't help but notice how she pressed buttons absent-mindedly, rewind, fast forward, pause. All with that same practiced precision she used on him. And in that quiet moment, something inside Daniel clicked. He realized he had forgotten how to say one simple word, no. It wasn't that he feared Linda. It was that he had been conditioned. Conditioned to keep peace. Conditioned to believe that love required surrender. That being a good husband meant being a controlled husband. But a man can only suppress his will for so long. And the remote she gripped so tightly was about to malfunction. Sunday mornings were Daniel's last sanctuary. Linda, not being a fan of church, used those mornings to reset her week, meaning sport treatments, brunches with her selective circle, or simply staying in bed scrolling through curated perfection on social media. For Daniel, however, Sunday was the only day he felt human again. The church wasn't just a building, it was oxygen. It was the one place Linda's remote didn't work. Not because she allowed it, but because she didn't care to follow him there. That morning, Pastor Femi's sermon was unsettling. He spoke about the dangers of silent manipulation in relationships, how control disguised as love was the deadliest kind of abuse. He spoke about invisible prisons. About people who lose their voice one tiny compromise at a time. Daniel sat there, stiff as stone. Every word was a mirror. After service, as members gathered for small talk, Pastor Femi walked up to him. Daniel, you've been carrying a heavy spirit lately. Talk to me. How are things at home? Daniel opened his mouth. And nothing came out. How do you explain that you're married, but you feel like property? That you live in a house, but it feels like a showroom where you're constantly being rearranged? He forced a smile. We are fine, Pastor. But something cracked in him that day. He didn't want to live his life on mute. When he got home, Linda was lounging on the couch, flipping through channels like she was testing the patience of the TV itself. Where were you? She asked, eyes still on the screen. Church. Did you remember to buy almond milk? You know I can't stand dairy. Daniel remained standing. Linda clicked the TV remote, turning down the volume. I asked you a question, Daniel. And that's when he said it. No. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was soft. Steady. Firm. Linda turned slowly, her expression unreadable. No, what? No, I didn't buy the almond milk. And no, I'm not your remote control. The room froze. For the first time in their marriage, Linda's fingers fumbled. She actually dropped the remote. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Because deep down, she knew the truth. Remotes only work when the device responds. Daniel had just glitched. And the reboot was about to be unbelievable. For a long moment, Linda stared at Daniel as if seeing a stranger. Her mouth was slightly open, the remote now lying awkwardly on her lap. She wasn't used to this. Daniel, the man who would apologize for breathing too loudly, had just told her no. And worse, he had said it with calm. Excuse me, she asked, her voice sharp. I said no, Linda, Daniel repeated, his tone not rising, but carrying a weight she had never heard before. I'm done being programmed. Linda's laughter came suddenly, but it was brittle. Programmed. Daniel, stop being dramatic. He took a step closer. Every day, you press buttons. Telling me when to speak, when to move, when to shrink myself so you can feel taller. I've allowed it. But today, I'm done. Linda stood up now, her composure cracking. Don't twist this. I'm just helping you be better. You think I do all this for myself? You'd be nothing without my guidance. Daniel's jaw clenched, but his voice remained steady. You call it guidance. I call it control. The silence between them was suffocating. Linda reached for the remote, clutching it like a lifeline. But now, it felt useless. For years, it had been her invisible weapon, her means of steering Daniel's every move. But at that moment, it was nothing more than a plastic shell with no batteries. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't fold. "I'm not asking for a fight, Linda. I'm telling you, this ends now. You want respect. Give it. You want a partner. Treat me like one." Linda's face hardened. "You're being ungrateful." Daniel's lips curled into a sad smile. "No, Linda. I've been ungrateful to myself. And that stops today." He turned and walked to the bedroom. Not in defiance, but in freedom. Linda stood in the living room, remote in hand, pressing buttons that no longer connected to anything. For the first time, she realized, the power had never been in the remote. It had always been in Daniel's compliance. And now, the signal was lost. The following week was a battlefield of silence. Linda, who had always been fluent in command, found herself stumbling through passive-aggressive remarks. She tossed in casual jabs. "Oh, I guess you decide what we're eating now," but Daniel didn't take the bait. He responded with calm respect, refusing to be dragged back into her control. It was disorienting for her. She was used to pressing volume up and watching him scramble. She was used to mute whenever his opinions weren't aligned. Now, the buttons weren't working, and Linda didn't know what to do with herself. On Wednesday evening, they were invited to a family gathering. Normally, Linda would dictate what Daniel wore, how he greeted his aunties, and even rehearse conversations with him on the drive. But that day, Daniel picked out his own clothes. Simple. Confident. His style. "Don't you think that shirt is too casual for the occasion?" Linda asked, standing at the door with a fixed smile. "No," Daniel replied. "I think it's fine." On the way to the event, she tried once more. "You should let me handle conversations with Uncle Say. He can be difficult." Daniel smiled. "I can manage." It wasn't rebellion. It was clarity. At the gathering, Daniel was himself. Charming, thoughtful, engaging, traits Linda had long since convinced him he didn't possess without her coaching. Family members commented on how relaxed he looked. His cousins laughed more in his presence. Even Uncle Say complimented him on his recent project. Linda watched all this unfold, feeling displaced. She realized her fear wasn't of losing control over Daniel. Her fear was that Daniel never needed her control to thrive in the first place. That night, they returned home in silence. As they entered the house, Linda placed the remote on the coffee table. Slowly. Deliberately. "I don't know how to love you without steering, Daniel," she admitted, her voice small. "I've been holding on so tightly because, if I'm not in control, who am I?" Daniel sat beside her. "You're my wife, Linda. Not my operator. I never asked you to lead me. I wanted you beside me." Linda's eyes welled up. It wasn't anger now. It was fear. Fear of irrelevance. Fear that without control, she wouldn't be valued. Daniel reached out and took her hand. "Let's learn how to live without the remote," he said. For the first time in their marriage, the house felt neutral. It wasn't Daniel's domain. It wasn't Linda's command post. It was simply home. But detoxing from control wasn't easy. Linda found herself fighting edges daily. She would notice Daniel's shoes slightly misaligned and her fingers would itch to correct him. She'd hear him on a phone call and bite her tongue, resisting the need to coach his tone. Control had been her language, and now she was learning silence. Daniel noticed her struggles. He wasn't cruel about it. He didn't gloat. But he didn't surrender either. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Daniel said, "You know, Linda, control isn't leadership. It's fear dressed in authority." Linda looked up from her plate, her fork pausing midair. Fear of what? Fear of losing yourself if you're not in charge, Daniel said gently. But leadership is different. Leadership invites partnership. Control demands obedience. Linda sighed deeply, placing her fork down. I don't know how to invite partnership, Daniel. I've always believed if I don't steer, everything crashes. Daniel smiled softly. Then let's start with a small step. He stood up and fetched the TV remote from the table, the very object that had become a symbol of their silent war. He handed it to Linda. You get to choose tonight's movie, he said. Linda blinked, surprised. That's not a big deal. It is, Daniel said. But here's the catch. You pick what you want, and I'll pick how we watch it. No directions from you. No commands from me. Equal. She hesitated, then nodded. She selected a documentary she loved. Daniel chose to sit comfortably, shoes off, reclined, not in the polite posture Linda used to correct. She said nothing. They watched. No corrections. No adjustments. And for the first time, Linda realized that letting go of the remote didn't mean losing herself. It meant trusting that connection didn't require control. After the movie, Linda turned to Daniel. You're still here, she said, half joking, half amazed. I was never leaving, Daniel replied. I just wanted to be with you, not under you. Linda reached out, holding his hand. It was shaky. But it was real. The remote lay on the table between them, silent, untouched. And they both smiled. Because the buttons no longer mattered. Months passed. Daniel and Linda's home transformed, not in furniture or decor, but in energy. Their conversations became genuine, their silences comfortable. Linda still struggled with her urge to orchestrate, but now she caught herself, smiled, and paused. It was a strange new rhythm, but it was theirs. Daniel noticed. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, something they hadn't done in years, Daniel casually said, You know, Linda, it was never about the remote. Linda raised an eyebrow, slicing vegetables. Oh. Then what was it about? Daniel leaned against the counter, smiling. It was about fear. You thought controlling me was the only way to secure love. And I thought obeying you was the only way to keep peace. Linda exhaled slowly. We were both trapped in a script we didn't write. But now we are free, Daniel said. That weekend, a surprise awaited Linda. Daniel had arranged a small gathering of close friends and family. Not a formal dinner, just an evening of shared stories, laughter, and music. Linda, used to being the orchestrator of every social event, was anxious. What if things go wrong? She asked Daniel. He smiled. Then we fixed them together. The evening was a success. Linda laughed more than she had in years. She danced without pre-planning every move. She listened, truly listened, as people spoke. And most importantly, she stopped trying to direct the room. She realized that moments didn't need her hands gripping them to be meaningful. Later that night, as they sat under their porch, Daniel handed Linda a small box. She opened it to find a sleek, modern universal remote control inside. Linda laughed. Seriously, Daniel? Seriously, he grinned. It's a reminder. A reminder of what? That you don't need this to be powerful. You're powerful without it. But more importantly, we are powerful when we choose each other, not when one of us controls the other. Linda felt tears stain her eyes. She had spent so long believing that leadership required domination. That without control, she would be unseen. But Daniel had shown her a love that didn't need levers and buttons. A love that stood side by side. She hugged him, remote still in hand. I'm ready to return this to the store, she whispered. Daniel laughed. No, keep it. Let it be the only remote in this house that gathers dust. From that day, their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Linda still had her quirks. Daniel still had his stubborn moments. But they had learned the most important truth. Love isn't a remote control. It's a dialogue. Control may feel like power. But freedom feels like home. And sometimes, the most unbelievable thing in a controlling relationship isn't the fight, it's the choice to stay and heal.